Good evening from New York. In the GOP's desperation to find a new message and a new messenger, it seems to have forgotten the input of its most influential member, Boss Limbaugh. Our fifth story in the countdown. Once again, Republican, quote, leaders, unquote, on Capitol Hill learning the hard way that they apparently must do nothing and say nothing without the express audio permission of the party boss. What still seems to be Boss Limbaugh's party, and he'll cry if he wants to, this week crying for, quote, standard, run-of-the-mill, good old-fashioned American conservative values, as articulated by none other than Governor Sarah Palin, who was ridiculed by party leaders over the weekend at the first-ever meeting of the party's self-named National Council for a New America, a group formed in an effort to rebrand the GOP as a party with some ideas, in fact, with some new ideas, as something other than the party of no. Governor Palin apparently invited, but it seems she did not reply to the invitation. Her exclusion, no big whoop to Minority Whip Eric Cantor, Mr. No himself, who suggested in response to a question about Governor Palin's inclusion on the Time magazine list of the 100 most influential people that he wants to focus more on ideas and less on Palin or Limbaugh. Former Governor Romney joking in response to the same question that he was not sure whether Governor Palin belonged on a list of the most influential people or on the list of the most beautiful people. Boss Limbaugh finding the entire premise of the GOP's New Ideas operation a joke, apparently because he's perfectly content with all of the ideas of the old party as represented by President Reagan, even though Reagan is dead and he was a lousy president. More recently, Limbaugh thinks the old ideas have been best represented by Governor Palin, the boss believing that party leaders, the ones who lead the party in name anyway, that they do not like the former vice presidential nominee.
Something else you have to understand, these people hate Palin, too. They despise Sarah Palin. They fear Sarah Palin. They don't like her either. She's, according to them, she's embarrassing. When you strip all the talk, it's the Reagan era is over, and we got to stop all this nostalgia and stuff. Clearly, in last year's campaign, the most prominent, articulate voice for standard, run-of-the-mill, good old-fashioned American conservatism was Sarah Palin.
Hey, Governor, you've just been called articulate. Demand and ye shall receive. Within hours, the GOP announcing that the governor had accepted its invitation to join the National Council. Time now to call in our own political analyst, Richard Wolff. Good evening, Richard.
Good evening, Keith.
Mere coincidence, I'm sure that less than 24 hours after Limbaugh lashed out, the New Ideas Council of the GOP announced that Governor Palin had accepted their invitation to join up, right?
Total coincidence, and I think you've got to look at this rebranding effort in terms of not so much a new brand, more like just putting the old Republican face on everything. I mean, Limbaugh's problem is that they're trying to rebrand at all and look to the future. And it's a very interesting idea that when it comes to the ideas of the future, they really need to go back to social conservatism and the personal story of an Alaska governor who was never known for ideas. The point here is that Limbaugh's problem is that he thinks this is a primary for 2012, and Sarah Palin wasn't there. It's not about ideas for him. It's just about getting his favored candidate in place.
And is there also another disconnect in that premise from Limbaugh? I mean, if Sarah Palin was the answer for the Republican Party, if she was the articulate voice, the most articulate voice of the real values of the nation, wouldn't John McCain be president right now?
Well, who can forget her significant contribution to fruit fly research and the economic crisis? You know, she obviously made an incredible contribution to John McCain's election effort for all of 2 weeks. So, you know, one thing that's interesting as this debate has played out is listening, for instance, to someone like Colin Powell, who actually was a Reagan favorite, and he said what Republicans need to do right now is come up with ideas for how to deal with the economy. That's nothing that Sarah Palin or John McCain did through the campaign. If they had, they might have come closer to winning.
Should there be any doubts that Boss Limbaugh still leads this party in practice, if not in name, if we have seen this scenario in which he puts out this premise that she has somehow been ignored by this group, she wasn't included, and it turned out she had been invited but had not responded in time, but in the interim they made a huge deal out of responding to his response to this? I mean, he cracks the whip and they just line up behind him time and time again.
Well, here's the problem. There is no one who leads the party. And in that vacuum, you have the insubstantial figure of Rush Limbaugh. The problem is that if you're going to have an ideas tour, start with the ideas. Don't start with the marketing. Don't start with a debate about who should be there and who shouldn't. You've got to sit down, do some research. And again, one thing we never saw from Palin throughout the campaign or in terms of her record in Alaska was ideas. The Republican Party is sorely in need of some new ones. It would be good for democracy if they came up with them. It's not about new faces or new voices. It does come back to the ideas.
Two things. Hey, Rush Limbaugh, somebody just called your figure insubstantial. And the second thing is a question. That, what you just touched on, though, that has been the gist of the Republican Party since about 2003, I would think you could say. Whatever they've said has been rejected in growing measure by the American populace. So they have just decided that they need to say it a little bit louder. That's about it, isn't it?
Say it a little bit louder or come up with a new slogan. But the problem is the policy model has been rejected, and it just isn't working. Again, to come back to Powell, he said that people want right now more government, not less. How do you square that with the idea of limited government and what Republicans are advocating? It's very, very hard.
Yeah, it would seem to be exactly the opposite, in fact. MSNBC political analyst Richard Wolff is always Richard. Great, thanks.
Thank you, Keith.